Do you ever set goals and then not follow through?
There is one thing standing in between you and your ghost. Today we're talking about it.
Welcome into the Harvest, friends. We are here where our goal is to bring you clarity and the confidence that you need to be a disciple and make disciples in the everyday places of life. I'm Abigail, and I'm here with Keith and Andrew. Hey, guys.
Hey, Abigail. Good morning.
Good morning, Abigail. Like that shirt.
Thanks. I'm all polka dotted today. Friends, do I look a little bit clearer? I hope so. I don't know. We'll let everyone decide once this goes out. But I have a lot more technology in the room today. I got a very giant box that you guys heard the doorbell ring for in the last episode. And now it's all up and running thanks to Zach, our awesome tech guy, and a very quick run that I had to make to Walmart today for a memory card. So we're now up and running. But you know what? Shout out to Trey, who I hope is listening, because Trey helped me at Walmart today, and we got talking about Jesus and his walk with Jesus, and I took his phone and made him subscribe. So that's one way to get subscribers. So
that's awesome.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing great, Abigail. Yeah, we were joking a little bit just before hitting the record button on this because I was supposed to send you an SD card. So we had sent a whole bundle of equipment to upgrade your side of the show, and I forgot to send the SD card. But the Lord redeems our failure, and he enabled you to not only pick up the SD card today, but to have that conversation with Trey and share your faith with him, which is just pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely a divine appointment. So I'm glad that happened. And I hope that Trey's listening. Anyway, let's get started. So we are in our last episode of our Building a Better Year series. And so today we're going to be talking about that critical factor of follow through and seeing how we are sticking to our goals. I think this is really the perfect time to do this episode because we're nearing the end of January. And that's usually when all of our goals just kind of, I don't know, they peter out just a little bit. Anyway, We're going to get into it, dive into that in a minute. But first, Andrew, we have a couple of announcements, right?
We do. Actually, we just started a new weekly newsletter. It goes out every Sunday called Harvest Highlights. We just sent out the first one this past week. And the goal of this weekly email is to provide people with insights and inspiration for how to be more faithful as disciples of Jesus and how to be more effective as disciple makers for Jesus. So if that's something that our listeners are interested in, we'd love to have you guys sign up and subscribe so that you get that every Sunday. You can sign up by going to our website, intotheharvest.org/newsletter, and enter your email, and you'll get the very next copy of Harvest Highlights. So that's one thing that's going on that's new this year that we'd love for people to sign up for. And then the second announcement today is that we're going to be doing an Ask Us Anything show here in February. And we've already received several questions from listeners and from our friends in the Into the Harvest community, but we'd love to hear from you. So if there's something that you would like us to address, either about Into the Harvest ministry, about being a disciple, about how we follow Jesus and make disciples, or about our plans for 2020. If there's anything that you want to ask us, that's what we're going to be talking about here. Probably not next week, but in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing an Ask Us Anything show. So the easiest way to ask your question is to email us, and you can do that at info@intotheharvest.org. But you could also connect with us on social media, send us a DM on Facebook or through Instagram, and we'll get it. And looking forward to that. So we definitely want to hear from you guys. Otherwise, that will be a short show. So hit us up with your questions on email or social media.
Awesome. I like how you said ask us anything, but then you gave suggestions of what people could ask. So
Yeah,
apparently some things are off limits. I don't know.
You could ask us anything, doesn't mean that it will get answered.
That's right. There's some things we may not answer. Who's to say? Who's to say?
Yes.
But honestly, we probably answer anything. I can't think of anything we wouldn't answer. Okay, so we're excited about that. So get your questions in. So let's get started on our topic. So what we have is really kind of how we can match these good intentions that we've made over the last few weeks with good systems so that we have follow through. These aren't just lofty goals that never actually get met, but actually happen in our lives. So we're going to talk about that today. Andrew, why don't you give us kind of an overview?
Yeah, so over the last month, we've talked about the importance of setting goals and cultivating high impact habits and establishing weekly rhythms. And if you think about it, all of those things really help us get started in creating the kind of life that we want to live, life that is lived by the values that we have as followers of Jesus. We talked about in our episode of cultivating high impact habits that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And so goal setting, high impact habits, weekly rhythms, those are systems that can help us get started. But what you talked about today, Abigail, at the very beginning is so important that we don't want to just get started, get off to a good start, and then peter out at the end of January. But we really want to find a way to grow consistently throughout the year with the goals and the habits that we know are going to help us be more faithful as followers of Jesus. And so we also need to think about systems that will help us stay on track or get back on track, which is really what we're going to talk about today, how to follow through with those goals and habits that we want to set. And it's important because as we go through this journey of living our lives day in and day out, week in and week out, you need waypoints or opportunities to pause and assess, like, how's it going? Am I on track? And get back on track if you have strayed, or celebrate. Maybe you're doing great. It's still important to take time to reflect and find out how you're doing, and to celebrate what the Lord has done in your life. And we kind of did that a little bit when we talked about setting annual goals. It's good to do on an annual basis, but you really need to learn how to do that throughout the year as well. So that's part of what we'll discuss today. Zach and I were talking as we were prepping for this particular topic, and I thought he made a really great point. He said, most of us, we don't fail because our goals are too lofty. It's not that we're trying to reach the moon, so to speak, with our goals, and we just can't get there because we're aiming too high. Most of us, when we fail to follow through with our goals, it's because we don't have good systems in place to be consistent long enough to really build those patterns into our lives. So that's really what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. This kind of plays into a conversation Brett and I had last night. One of my goals is to drink more water this year. This is not a spiritual goal, obviously, but I have this app and I love it so much. And you guys can laugh at me because I use an app for all my goals, it seems. But this particular one has like a picture of a water bottle, and you can pick the size of the water bottle that you want, and then you can slowly lower it as you drink it. And it's very visual. And then at the end of the day, you have your whole like little circle filled up that you've drunk. And Brett did not know about this app. I was just kind of doing it. But he did know about my goal for drinking more water. And he said, hey, you could just get a big gallon of water and fill it up and then just slowly drink it throughout the day. And then you wouldn't have to use your phone. And I thought, well, that's a terrible idea, because then I wouldn't have that awesome like feeling of success at the end of the day with my little picture of my full water bottle. But there's something to that. I mean, I know that's really silly, but in some ways, having that visual or having that like little waypoint for me to see how I'm doing is actually really, really helpful for me. I am like a 5-year-old with a sticker chart or something. I genuinely need that kind of visual thing to show me that I'm succeeding. And I think this is very much fits into that we need to find those ways that help us to succeed along the way. As we're going, we're not just going to check in at, December 31st and see how we did. We want to put things into place, and not just monthly, but maybe even on a daily and weekly basis. So that's kind of what we want to do today, I think.
One of the things I love about doing this podcast with Abby and Andrew is that sometimes you hear things you've never heard before. So I've never heard of petering out before. That's petered out. That's a new term for me, but it totally makes sense because I get it. So I'm going to apply what we're learning here today and check in with Peter. I'm sorry, bro. We keep bringing up what happened. You denying Jesus. You redeemed yourself. You totally did. So Peter, hang in there, man. You're a great model to us all in Christ. But yeah, I do get the concept of checking in, the petering in out. That was amazing. That's going to stick with me, guys.
That's a Texas.
Keith, you just blew my
thing, right?
mind, because I genuinely have used that term my whole life. It was just a word to me at this point.
Right.
And I just made the connection about Peter in the Bible. So is that where that word comes from? I will look it up and get it back to us all. But we just had a little word nerd session. Back on track. Guys, wow, Keith. That really could be where that word comes from. I don't know. Okay. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah. So, actually, it was kind of on par with that. It was from Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, very popular verse. But it's three things that it tells us to do. And I think it's great for checking in, and the first one is to let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. So the first one is we should be thinking about it before we even engage with each other on what's going on in our lives or what may be happening. And then the second one is to meet together. Let us not stop meeting together, because a lot of people don't meet together. There's a lot of orphans in our faith, which blows my mind. And the last one is to let us encourage one another. So I think as I check in with people, and as I want people to check in with me, I hope they have those three things, in mind. If they're thinking about it beforehand, that we are getting together, that we are meeting. It doesn't say when, where, how, but just that we should meet. And that during that time, we're thinking about how to encourage one another so that we can keep going. Like Zach was saying, I think that kind of accountability would help us all get to our goals if we had someone to check in on us.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I think that's just a great thing for us all to be reminded of as we continue with maybe some more tangible things that we can do. That is what we're trying to achieve, or those verses there in Hebrews. So as far as goals and habits and rhythms go, how do we go about making sure that we stick with them for the long haul? So Andrew, what is our first tip?
Right. So there's actually two big things that we're going to try to convince you to put into place so that you can follow through and continue to live by your goals and your habits for 2020. And the first of those we already mentioned, which was to set up a way of reviewing your goals on a regular basis. So we'll talk some more about that in just a little bit. But the second thing that Keith began to talk about was to find accountability in your life and to find people that you can share your goals, your habits with, and possibly even recruit to join you. If you've got some habits that you're trying to put into place into your own life, if you can find one or two other people who want to develop those same habits, then what you want to do is you actually want to build in accountability into your life. And years ago, I heard a little phrase that it's not what's expected, it's what's inspected that gets accomplished. And you guys have probably heard that before, but it's really so true that all of these things that we've talked about in January, we're actually trying to understand human nature, how we're wired, and then use that to our advantage. And one of the ways that we're wired is that we work to deadlines, or we live up to what gets inspected. And so, we can have all of these lofty goals and ideals, but if no one ever checks in on us, then the chance of us actually sticking with those things over the long haul goes way down. And so accountability is something else that we want to talk about today. And so I would actually kind of like to ask you guys, is there something that you do either in the way of accountability that's helping you this year, or setting aside time to review your goals.
Mm.
You want to go first, Abby?
We're both like looking at each other
I know,
like,
right?
are you gonna go?
You take
Sure,
it. You take it.
Okay, I'll go first. I think for me, it is important to tell people about your goals so they could check in on you. But it's also really establishing and learning how to ask good questions of each other. So I can tell a friend, I have this goal, and they can be like, cool, you should totally do that. And then you're like, yeah, would you keep me accountable? And they say, sure. And then time just passes, it never comes up. So if this is not something that's, is something that's going on in your community or in your own life, like that's okay, but you can start. And the way to do that is to kind of do a little like teaching session with whoever it is you want to keep you accountable, and just say, hey, the next time I see you, would you ask me this pointed question? For me, it's all about the questions, because in some ways, I can be kind of a sneaky person in general, just sharing all my deep, dark secrets. And so if you don't flat out ask me how I'm doing, I may not tell you that I'm not doing great in this certain area. And so as time progresses and those questions get asked more and more, then I might start to volunteer it, because it's almost like I hear the questions in my head when I'm meeting with that person, so they don't have to say it anymore. But when you're first starting out, I think it really is key to have very pointed, direct questions. So I think just to take some time to think about, what are the questions I need to be asked on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, whatever it might be. And then find those people that you can really trust to ask you those questions, and then straight up ask them to ask you and just say, hey, ask me this question, however, when, fill in the blank. For me, that has been so crucial in my struggle against sin in my life, and in particular goals, particularly things like sharing the gospel, which is something I struggle with. Having people ask me point blank, did you do this? It's really, really helpful for me then, as I'm going along, trying to achieve those things, trying to fight against sin, to just be reminded in my mind, well, somebody's going to ask me about this, so I'm going to try to do better. And it's good to remember that, God knew this about us. He knew we were going to be people of community, people that were a body of believers, and that we would need each other to do this, to ask each other good questions, and to encourage each other, just like those verses said. So I think that for me is really, really probably super key, is just good questions.
See, I knew there was a reason I was going to let you go first, Abby. I love that point. I think that's clutch right there. I had a good friend, and I won't name drop him on a podcast, but every time he seen me, the first thing he would say is, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? And finally, I told him, I was like, man, you can ask me how I'm doing, and I'm not going to give you much, because I know that's what you're going to say. Like, it's almost become like routine. Like, you're going to say how you doing. So I was like, a better question, a question that I might need, it's what's going on? Like, how you really doing? Like, what's underneath? Because he was a good friend. I really wanted to talk to him, and I really wanted to tell him what was going on, but his question was always, how you doing? So I think asking the right question is everything. And you go back to, early in the Bible, when Adam did what he wasn't supposed to, the first thing that God did was ask him the right question. That's we follow those questions with more questions. So I do think that questions have been really helpful, but the environment is important. So I wouldn't ask Andrew a question in front of our whole church, because it's a lot harder to be more vulnerable. So I think in one-on-one settings, when you're in a privacy of that intimate conversation, I think it's a lot better to get a little deeper there. And Abby, I know you talked about apps that actually help you, and I'm with you. Sometimes I use apps. A good one that I use for accountability is one called Covenant Eyes, because it filters adult material, and it also sends weekly reports to those who you want to keep you accountable. So you can actually put their email on there. It's about $10 a month, but I think it's totally worth it, because there's another safeguard and there's another level of accountability that, hey, if one of the guys sees my report, or my wife sees it, and there's something bad on there, they know what's going on in my life. So I think that asking the right questions, but also in the right settings where it's a little bit more intimate and you can be vulnerable, is really everything.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the old quote that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that's the thing. Like we can have all of these great goals, we can have these high ideals, and these good intentions, but that's not enough. And that's really what we're talking about today is what's going to actually help us follow through with those goals, with those habits, with those intentions. And a huge one is accountability. So I love what you were saying there, Keith, about the Lord coming down to the garden and looking for Adam and Eve. And you're right, he asked them he asked them the right questions, so he starts out with, where are you? And then what have you done? And like, he just walks it all the way through. And so I think that's so true that we need that. Otherwise, we just don't live up to what we know is right. And Abigail, you made some great points too about, giving people even the specific words to ask, and so you're giving them permission, but you're also giving them the words. And your point about maybe this is the way God designed us because it would force us to rely on each other, that accomplishing our goals is not something that is a solo endeavor, that we're going to have to rely on those who are closest to us to help us follow through on these aspirations that we have to follow Jesus and to be faithful. So yeah, it's good stuff, guys.
Yeah. So as you were talking about covenant eyes, I remembered a really great story. And I think it also maybe points out something that's important to remember here. So I'll just tell it real fast. When I first got married, it was the first time I'd heard about covenant eyes. My husband was using it on our computers. And I mean, I think he told me about it and like basically what it did, but I was kind of like, yeah. Well, I would say in the first month of marriage, this was a long time ago, but think back and maybe you remember when Britney Spears went off the deep end and shaved her head. Well, it was a very exciting time. And I very much wanted to see pictures of Britney Spears going off the deep end. And this also, once again, telling you stories that I shouldn't tell you. But here I was, and I full on Googled Britney Spears pictures. And Brett's accountability partner got an email and it was like, you're looking for pictures of Britney Spears. So he gets a call and it's hey, like what's going on, and I am so embarrassed. Like I could not have been more embarrassed. Like for one, this very sweet older gentleman knew that I was I wanted to know what was going on with Britney Spears, which is not very holy. This was like my first impressions and they were terrible. But that was horrifying for me. And I think if you're listening to this and you're like, this level of sharing and in depth, like being in each other's life is horrifying. Like this seems scary. Don't worry. It can feel that way going into it. But when you start to really see results, and for me, sins that I had fought for years and years and years and just struggled with and had never really seen victory in, to really see actual victory because of the hardness that there can be in being in a community and in relationship with people that are going to ask you hard questions and you have to answer them in awkward fashion. Like, yes, it was me who liked pictures of Britney Spears. And that was fine. She was just shaving her head, no big deal. But anyway, the point is I just really encourage you. This may sound scary. This may sound like something you don't want to do. You just want to do it alone and get it done. And maybe you can, but for most of us, we need that help of someone else. So anyway.
Yeah. My last tip on that, I think we got to stay ahead of the world, Abby. I think that's good. Like, I think we should encourage people to do that because a lot of these people that are in business or athletes, they spend thousands, if not millions, on their body, like for somebody else to prepare their meals, to help them stay in shape, to hold them accountable to work out. So I don't think it's wrong for us to push other believers to do whatever it takes,
Yeah, somewhere in there, I think we got the idea that if we're being pushed out of our comfort zone in the area of our faith and in our discipleship, our following of Jesus, that something's wrong. And I don't know, maybe that's just a lie from the enemy, because this is the number one area that we should be striving to live up to the devotion that Jesus deserves. And if part of that is having brothers and sisters who love us, who will challenge us, who will push us to follow through with the things that we already say that we want to do, then that's what we should sign up for. That we shouldn't shy away from that and feel like somehow that's the wrong way to go. We should be looking for that kind of challenge and accountability. So, yeah, it's a good word.
All right, Andrew. So we've talked about accountability. What are maybe some regular review things we could do to also help us?
Well, I know, Abigail, you've talked about journaling, which many people do on a daily basis. And journaling is actually one of the ways that you're pausing long enough to take stock of how your life is going. It's not something that I do, mainly because I'm not disciplined as a writer. But I do try, we talked about this on our show about winning the morning. I do try to have a morning ritual where I will map out my day and think about what's going to happen. Part of that is looking back at maybe what I didn't accomplish the day prior and trying to improve that. So a couple of things that I do that help me in the area of review is to have very short, we're talking like 5-minute daily reviews. And then I do a weekly preview and review, like on Sunday evenings, where I just take, again, for me, this is 10 to 15 minutes where I look back over the past week. And I do actually have a journal that I'm using this year. I guess it's a planner because I don't journal. But I'm trying it out this year, so I'm not sure if I'm going to give it the green light. But so far I like it. It's called the Full Focus Planner by a guy named Michael Hyatt. So I'm only about a month into this particular tool, but it's been helpful to look back and see how the previous week went and have I followed through on some of those habit goals, including the spiritual habit goals that I have. And then also quarterly that I try to go away for a half day at least to review how have I spent 25% of this year, and is it really matching up with what I want to be spending my year on. So those are a couple of ways that I try to build review into my regular life, whether it's daily, weekly, or quarterly. I don't know, do you guys have any way that helps you just sort of pause and reflect and get back on track if you've gotten off track?
Yeah, I do like to take moments to go on prayer walks to really just let my brain to almost unwind and detangle the things that are going on, and let the Holy Spirit, prompt, prayer on things that's going on in areas where I need to get better. And I think one of the most immediate responses I've seen so far is that God has surrounded me with solid people, like solid believers. And I really do believe that two is better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If one falls down, he can help up the other. And a lot of people don't have anyone to help them up. So I think when it comes to that kind of review, for me, it's helpful to have people around me to ask those questions and to help me stay on track, because I just can't do it alone. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not Han Solo. I'm not the lone wolf. I can't charge through these things alone. So seeking God in those moments and letting him, do his thing, and then also surrounding myself with fellow believers who will hold me accountable and keep me on the mission. So I do want to get better at review. I will admit that. Like, I do think that's something that I need to do, get more organized, like maybe come up with a journal or a way to look back through the week and not wing it as I have a tendency to do. But I do thank God that he has brought the right people in my life to help me with this.
Yeah, that's really good. Something you said there of just, needing to take that time on a prayer walk to kind of untangle your mind. And it just made me realize, that is one of the things I think that the Lord built into the Sabbath day. He wanted that day of rest so that we could take a minute to untangle our minds. Like you said, I think that part of rest is just who we are as humans. Like, we need a minute of silence. We need something that's a pause so that we even have time to take that minute of review. So that's really, really good, Keith. I think that's so great. And yeah, I mean, I've talked before about how I love journaling, and I also have a planner. So I have all the things in place and like 50 million apps that are telling me how I'm doing on my internet time and how much water I'm drinking. And it's out of control. So you guys already know that about me. But I think the big thing is just we really do already have a day set in place. It's Sunday usually for most people, or Saturday. But whatever day it is for you once a week that you really know you can take a pause, just think over your week, pray over it, and just see how you're doing. And if there's something you need to add in or take away so that you can reach those goals, I really think that's a good time to do it. So, all right. So just to review, we have kind of gone over goals and forming good habits and getting started in this new year. But now we want to build accountability, particularly, and then times of review so that we can really make sure we're reaching those goals and stay focused on Jesus in 2020. So this was a really cool series. I'm so glad you guys follow along with us. And we would love to hear what you have to think about this particular episode. How are you doing, you guys? Let us know how your goals for the year are going so far. We would love to hear it. Hey, also, if you have someone that's keeping you accountable, send them this episode and give them a big thank you. Or if you don't have anyone, maybe send this to somebody that you think would be a good accountability partner. And this is a good icebreaker episode for them. They'll know what you're asking of them. Anyway, we thank you so much for listening today. If this did encourage you in any way, we do ask that you would use the superpower of the internet by sharing this episode and helping us spread the word, and tell your friends about us and share this episode on Facebook. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, Abby.